All right, today we are jumping into a short but incredibly brutal story from the ancient world. It's got everything: civil war, a really gruesome assassination, and a moral decision that had absolutely massive stakes. I mean, it would go on to shape the entire future of a nation. But really, when you boil it all down, it asks one single powerful question. What if winning meant you had to betray your deepest values? What would you do? Well, that's the exact spot a king in the making finds himself in. Okay, let's get into it. So let's set the scene. We're talking around 1000 BC. The nation of Israel is completely broken. Its very first king, Saul, is dead, and the whole kingdom has just collapsed into this messy, bitter civil war. The stage is set for a major power struggle. Now, the kingdom was split right down the middle, and the two sides could not have been more different. On one hand, you have the house of Saul, led by his son Ish-bosheth. His territory in the north is weak, it's falling apart at the seams. And on the other hand, you have the house of David in the south. He's strong, he's been anointed, and his power is literally growing by the day. These two were on an inevitable collision course. Let's talk about the northern king for a second, Ish-bosheth. His name in Hebrew actually means man of shame. Now, scholars think his name was probably changed from something else, Ishbal, to avoid any connection to a pagan god. But the new name, it's just so perfectly and tragically fitting for this weak, failing ruler. Talk about a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? His own name pretty much tells you his fate. And this weakness, it becomes the central issue. See, after his top general gets killed, the text says Ish-bosheth's hands were feeble. That's a direct translation of a Hebrew idiom, yarath yad, and it basically means he just lost his nerve. He was completely demoralized, frozen by fear, and you better believe his entire kingdom could feel it. And then right in the middle of all this rising tension, the story hits the pause button to give us this one strange detail. It tells us about Saul's grandson, Mephibosheth, who was disabled. It feels totally random, but it's not. It's a clever bit of foreshadowing. It's planting a little seed about mercy and what happens to Saul's family line that's going to become super important later on. You know what happens when there's a power vacuum, right? Opportunists rush in to fill it. And a weak king is a walking invitation for trouble. So two of his own military captains, Baanah and Rechab, see the king's weakness not as a problem, but as their golden ticket. Their plan was as simple as it was brutal. They sneak into the palace while the king is taking his midday nap. They find him totally helpless, asleep in his own bed. The text says they smote him under the fifth rib, which means a fatal stab to the abdomen. And then, for the final symbolic act, they cut off his head, the rosh, the very symbol of his authority, and they take it with them. So, the bloody deed is done, and now the assassins start their journey to David. But this isn't just about getting from point A to point B. This journey is about to become the ultimate test of David's character and of his vision for what a kingdom should be. They travel under the cover of darkness, which is just perfect, isn't it, for men on such a dark mission? They're totally convinced they're about to change the course of history. And with them, they're carrying this absolutely gruesome prize, the severed head of their king. Now, to you and me, that's horrific. But to them, they saw it as the key that was going to unlock their future, to get them in good with David. And this is where the story gets really, really twisted. Because in their own minds, they weren't murderers. They were messengers. They were bringing good news, clearing the final obstacle from David's path to the throne. They were expecting to be treated like heroes. So they finally arrive. They walk right up to David, full of confidence. They present the head and declare, "Behold the head of Ish-bosheth. The Lord has avenged my lord the king." They even try to spin their murder as some kind of divine justice, something God wanted for David. They're waiting for the reward, the promotion, a seat at the high table. But what David does next, well, it's not what they expected. In fact, it's not what anyone expected. This is the climax of the story, the moment David shows everyone exactly what kind of king he plans to be. So David hears him say they're bringing good news, and he just latches onto that word. He uses the Hebrew verb bashar right back at them. He reminds them of a similar situation when some guy brought him the good news that King Saul was dead, also expecting a big reward. And what did David do? He had that guy executed on the spot. He's setting a precedent, so he asks them, What kind of reward do you think you deserve for murdering a righteous man in his own bed?
And just look at this disconnect. It is staggering. They expected a reward, they got a punishment. They thought they'd get a promotion, instead, they get a public execution. They wanted royal favor and a place of honor, but David gave them a traitor's legacy. He ordered their hands and feet cut off and their bodies hung up for everyone to see, a brutal public warning.
So, how do we make sense of this shocking verdict? Well, over the centuries, people have looked at it through a few different lenses. Rabbinic tradition sees it as David simply upholding God's law against murder, choosing ethics over opportunism. Early church fathers saw him as a symbol of Christ, rejecting any kingdom that's built on violence and betrayal. And a lot of modern scholars, they see it as a brilliant piece of political theater, a public performance to prove to everyone that David would gain power the right way, not through dirty tricks.
But no matter how you slice it, one thing is crystal clear. This single, decisive, and violent act of justice was absolutely critical in securing David's future as the king of a united Israel.
So how did this one moment achieve so much? Well, first, it sent a powerful message. Killing a king is off limits, period. It sets a huge precedent. Second, it proved David's own integrity, that he wasn't going to take any shortcuts to get to the top. Third, and this might be the most important part, it calmed the fears of the northern tribes. It showed them he was a just ruler, not some ruthless conqueror. This act is what allowed him to unite a broken nation and build the moral authority he needed to rule. And then David does one last thing, something that just seals the deal. In a powerful, stark contrast to this shameful display of the assassins' mutilated bodies, David orders that Ish-bosheth's head be given an honorable burial. He shows respect to his fallen enemy, proving his justice was about principle, not personal gain. This ancient story leaves us with a very modern question. The assassins believed power was something you could just take by force. David, with his shocking verdict, made the argument that real, lasting power is something you have to earn through integrity. So I'll leave you with that to think about. Is true power something you take, or is it something you earn?